Detected. Rogue agent neutralized. Contaminated gear detected. Hostile incinerator turret detected. Now detect. Contaminated gear detected. Rogue agent neutralized. Contaminated.
Hey everyone, RogueGold here, coming back at you today with another new season build video, and today it is all about the Backfire. This weapon has received a pretty hefty buff in this latest update, as well as some of the most common items that are typically used to build with it have also been buffed. And so in total, that makes for a pretty deadly loadout. As you saw in the gameplay, this thing is melting. Now, I personally prefer the playstyle and usage of this weapon within the context of the Dark Zone or PvP, but that is certainly not the only place that you could use this. You saw that I was shredding NPCs. You could very easily take this into PvE content. So we're going to get into the build here, but as I go through it, I will not only break down some of the changes that have happened, but I will also get into some possible PvE usage if you wanted to use it there instead. So let's go. Alright, and here is the build. Now we're going to go through, as usual, each of the different components here. I will explain some of the buffs that have happened when we get to that particular part. And in case you wanted to try and run this in PvE content instead, I will give a few recommendations as we go through as to how you might want to structure the build differently. But let us begin with the star of the show, the Backfire. Now the Backfire has been in the game for a long time. I'm sure many of you know how it works. And now the talent, description itself and the way that it works hasn't changed. You land shots, that gives you stacks of crit damage, and then when you reload, that applies a bleed to yourself, which is a percentage of those stacks that you have built up. The big change they made to the talent this season was that it has now halved the amount of time that it takes for you to build up those stacks, and they have also halved how much bleed damage you take. So previously, the talent here would have said that you get 1% crit damage up to 200 stacks in total that last 10 seconds. Now, however, you gain 2% crit damage for every hit up to 100 stacks. So the cap is still 200%, but you get the stacks themselves and you earn that crit damage twice as fast. Also, they did not change the amount of bleed damage that you get. So since the total amount of stacks is now 100 instead of 200, 100 times 0.5% armor damage is only 50% bleed damage. So although I'm still running a 100% hazard version on this build just because I don't want to be inflicted by that bleed and have myself slowed down in PvP, the Backfire has inherently become a lot easier to build for because you don't have to worry about those maximum stacks fully killing you if you're not running hazard. If you just wanted to have somewhere between 30, 40, 50, 60% hazard, you're likely not going to be affected by this new bleed amount all that much. In addition, they also buffed both of its crit mods. They both used to be 5%, and now the optic and the muzzle give you 15% crit chance and damage respectively. So overall, just some very nice changes made to the Backfire, and that serves as the kind of cornerstone and the pillar for which this entire build is built around. If we take a look at the stats quickly, you can see that because of those buff mods specifically, I'm at pretty much 60% crit chance. I think if I optimize one of my pieces, I will be at 60, and you can see on the breakdown on the right side just how few things I'm really needing to invest to get that. Beyond the inherent bonuses from my Keener watch and from the Backfire itself, I just have one piece of Seska and I have one roll on one of my pieces. That's all I need to get 60% crit chance. That's crazy. I then inherently have 141% crit damage, and then when you get, the full benefit of the Backfire talent, that would go up to 340%. So a very potent combination here. But let's move back to the gear and see exactly how we're achieving that. Obviously, for your secondary and your sidearm, that is all totally up to you. But let's get into how we're building this up and take a look at some of the other buffs that have happened to individual gear pieces as well. Just to say off the bat, I do have the Ninja Bike backpack, so you're going to see +1 to all of these brands that we're looking at. And typically, if you're running a DZ variant of this kind of a build, then the Ninja Bike is very good to be able to build a lot of those hazard bonuses. But if you did want to run this in PvE, then you certainly don't have to use the Ninja Bike, right? Like I said, you could find ways to just get a little bit of hazard so you're not taking too much damage from that bleed potential there, but you could run the Memento, you could run a high-end backpack, a gear set one, depending on what you want to run it with. But in general, this is structured for a more DZ and PvP style of play. So taking a look at the mask here, we have one piece of Seska, that's obviously going up to 2 with Ninja Bike, and this is the first big change here. Now the crit chance amount of Seska did go down from 10 to 8% as of this season, but the more notable change for this build specifically is that the 2-piece hazard bonus went from 10% to 20%. So automatically that is one less hazard roll that I need to have on my gear specifically that I can roll towards crit damage instead. And then on here I just have weapon damage, crit damage, hazard, and a crit damage mod. Before we move on to these two, let's skip over to the other buffed brand piece here, and that is Y'all. So I've got one piece of Y'all, again 2-piece because of Ninja Bike. The first piece is the same, it's 10% hazard, but the 2-piece got buffed from 5% weapon damage to 10% weapon damage. So across the board, our damage is just going up inherently by using these pieces. We got more crit on the mods, we got more damage here for free. So that's really great. And on here I have armor, hazard protection, and crit damage. Let's then move over to these two. I'm using 2 pieces of the Electrique gear set to get the 3-piece from Ninja Bike, which is 30% SMG damage. That is part of why this hits so hard, because we're really buffing up the base damage of the Backfire. And then once you get those crit stacks going, it just spikes like crazy. I am also using on this piece specifically the Henry named variant of an Electrique chest piece to get me perfect companion. Now this is not mandatory, right? If you want to run something like Unbreakable or Obliterate on an Electrique piece or even a different brand, you could totally do that. However, companion is just really nice to again buff your base damage even more. It's also not a damage buff that you have to ramp up, right? Like something compared to Obliterate where you would have to build that up. This just gets it off the bat as long as you have an ally or a skill near you. So I don't know, just feel free to experiment with what you like, but it seemed like using perfect companion here just fit in too well for me not to try it. So on here I have armor, crit chance, crit damage, and a crit damage mod. Moving on to the holster, this piece is not actually even fully optimized for this build because I'm missing a crit damage roll here. Ideally I would want armor, crit damage, and then a hazard protection roll. So even despite that shortcoming, this is still performing very well. But you can see that is the ideal one there. Obviously the second piece of Electrique, so I'm getting the 3-piece bonus. And then lastly, if we take a look at the knee pads, I have one piece of the Cavalier gear set, and this is because it is just too hard to pass this up with Ninja Bike, given you get 30% hazard protection just by running one piece of this alongside Ninja. But again, this is very interchangeable if you wanted to run this kind of a build in PvE, or if you just weren't as worried about the bleed now that it does less damage in PvP, you certainly don't have to run this. You could put on one piece of Walker and that would give you even more damage. That would be a very good buff, honestly. But yeah, I opted to go for Cavalier. Feel free to experiment. On here I've just got armor and crit damage. Then for the skills, I would say this is going to depend on what talent you run on your chest piece. If you choose to run the Henry or Companion in general, then the Explosive Seeker Mine is typically a really good skill to run with that because it follows you around a lot. This is especially for solo. I can't recommend this enough to be able to keep Companion on a high uptime. Additionally, the Defender Drone is just a good option when you're running this much armor, but it also tracks you around, so it will proc Companion. If you're not going to run Companion, however, this is totally up to you, depending on if you're in the DZ. If you're in PvE, you might want to run a Revive Hive, a Decoy, so many different options. Similarly with the specialization, I'm only running Firewall because of how potent the armor kit is for PvP potential, but Gunner would work super well here. Obviously, you get the armor on kill, the rate of fire on kill, all of those bonuses. So as always, use what feels right to you here. There you have it, my friends. That is the build that I've put together for the Backfire as of this latest season, and I hope you all enjoyed. I certainly have a lot of fun revisiting these older and less used items once they get some love, and frankly, I still have way more to try and test out. Everyone's raving about the Pestilence, we got the Ravenous, but yeah, for now, have fun with the Backfire if you decide to dust it off. And if you do, certainly let me know what combinations and builds you end up running or what works best for you. I'm certainly not the only one capable of putting together a competent build, so I would love to hear what you guys are running. If you did enjoy the video and you want to stay in the loop for all future builds, guides, breakdowns, news, everything on the Division 2 moving forward, then I hope you will consider clicking that subscribe button if you're not already. We'd love to have you around. That is going to do it for me today though, everybody. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. RogueGold. Out.